John, thank you for being patient with us, but please.
Yeah, and now John Woods again on the ad, and this is gonna be like a straw approach of some recent Navy work that's been going on. Just about me. So I was up at my first trip to the Arctic was to an ice camp, one of the ice X's back in 2009. And then the following year I came up here as part of the NASA Bromex project, which I think somebody in the audience were part of. And then probably my highlight was 2012. I brought about a dozen Naval Academy midshipmen up here. I was teaching at the Naval Academy at the time. We participated in the Barrow High School. It was like a field day event activity, and we were doing some of the traditional games. And remember those big long planks, and they had to stepping and walking. We were falling down all over ourselves, but it was a blast. I got some of those pictures. I should pull them up and give something to grab. So I'm giving this talk on behalf of Dr. Scott Harper. He is the program officer at ONR, who is kind of one of the main focuses on polar research. We've been doing a lot of data calls lately for all these things that Church has been talking about from a defense and a Navy perspective. And I think our latest number is about $50 million a year is what we're spending on research in the Arctic from ONR. Some of that obviously is based here in and around Reykjavik, but also a little bit more of a Navy focus being offshore. So again, if you want Scott's contact info, it's all there. And I just stole this from a brief that I had on my laptop. So here we go. And I'm going to be quick. I'm going to do like the podcast 2 times speed. So the Navy has a bunch of strategies. OSD has a strategy. Office of Secretary of Defense has a strategy. There's a national strategy. They're all being updated. The most recent one is the Blue Arctic one. That's the Navy strategy. You can see the bullets there. Enhanced President's cooperative partnerships, which I'm very interested in, and we've already heard a lot about. And then building a more capable Arctic naval force. I say this, I get in trouble sometimes when I say this, but the Navy, we have submarines that are operating in the Arctic a lot. We don't have any ships that are capable of operating up there, which is pretty scary. And I think besides the submarine community, the scientific community that's funded by the Navy is probably the leading Arctic experts from a DoD perspective. I shouldn't be saying that in front of some Air Force guys, but so I think, again, the scientific community, strong history tied here to the Navy Arctic Research Lab, but the ONR program has kind of been reinvigorated since the early 2000s again, since the Navy's been focusing on this again. I don't have to tell this audience that it's a tough climate. Sorry, it's cut off there. The Arctic is a tough operating environment. You see sailors here on gray hulled ships. So those are Navy ships. You see they're not even in sea ice, but they're in freezing spray, which is very deadly to a ship. And believe it or not, a Louisville Slugger is how they knock ice off of a ship still. So we're trying to improve that with new technologies other than baseball bats. It's a challenging environment. Here's the thrust areas. So new observing technologies and methods. We've heard a lot about improving observations, increasing observation, better understanding, and then modeling. So taking those forecasts, you saw some of that in Andy's presentations this morning. These I'm going to skip. That's just too much. We do have a poster that I want to highlight that's down at the bar. And this is the slide I really want to show. So this highlights back in 2011 is what Scott says, when the program was sort of reinvigorated. Bottom right, there's a calendar of all these different projects that have been going on, mostly in the Beaufort. Again, there's some over on the Eurasian side. Different experiments, different levels, different scales. And these are all 2-3 year projects with field activities in between. Highlight is the most recent one. Well, you can see that you'll see a progression in the technology of sea gliders and underwater vehicles, adding in above or unmanned aerial vehicles. And then finally, the latest one, you'll see some of these mega buoys that we have that are using basic modems for underwater vehicles technologies. So here's this Navy Arctic blueprint. I don't love the word blue. I think it falsely says that the Arctic Ocean is turning blue. I don't think that's true. It's always going to be dark and cold and white. In the harshest times of the year. I do want to foot stomp here on this ice paper. You saw I had some sticker swag up top. There's the acronym. It's the International Cooperative Engagement Program for Polar Research. It has all the Nordic or Arctic partners minus Russia and Iceland. Iceland doesn't have a defense force; they're more Coast Guard based. but it also includes New Zealand. So our southern partners in the south, research around Antarctica, very similar to some of the work that we're doing up in the Arctic. So highlighting the international piece is another focus area for the Department of the Navy specifically, as well as the Department of Defense. And then here's the AMOS one that I was telling you about. And there's this test node. Again, this was all deployed off the Healy, a couple hundred miles offshore from here, but really trying to get the underwater comms going with these underwater vehicles, underwater and under ice vehicles. So these are vehicles that are underneath the ice. We're working on the communications between the vehicles so that they don't have to come up to the surface and to communicate. So again, challenges they're there with I don't even know, those aren't even bats, those are like rakes or something like that. They're trying to get the ice off the ship with. Clothing mentioned earlier, they're still using those are just standard issue camouflage that you'd wear at any latitude. The submarines, again, they are operating up there every 2 years. I know UIC, the logistics group, supports that a lot. Couldn't be done without them. And then here's that one version of those bigger buoys. So there you go, the one on the upper left there. That's on the Healy. That's a crane. That's a 20-foot tall spar buoy that's going in with packed with batteries to allow for all these vehicles that they're deploying underneath the ice to be able to communicate. And then here's this cool little cartoon. So I wanted to finish, Jack Nugent, can you share the slide, hopefully, of the IBP? This is the poster that I want you to all see. So Jack, are you there, able to share? If he's not, that's okay. I'll meet you at the bar. Oh, here we go. So the International Arctic Buoy Program, I can see it there. There we go. This has been year round, or not year round, but we've been coming up here for ever since, like I said, the late 2000s. More recently, I like to highlight the North Slope Faro, the SAR organization here. They've been really instrumental in getting us out on their helicopter to set up these buoy arrays. If we get out to you heard a lot about the DOE ARMS site and the NOAA site. We have a test platform out there where we have basically all the Arctic buoys that go out on the ice. They're all sitting there for calibration and testing and comparison. So again, really, critical community. We aren't up here year round. We'll call McGrook and his team to say, hey, go out and change the batteries or swap out something on one of these buoys for us. And they're always there for us, especially during COVID. When we weren't able to get researchers up here, the local community, we did not miss a step in getting our sensors out there due to the locals being able to support us, and that's all due to the relationships that we've been building up over the decades. So I think that's all I got. Like I said, this poster now is hopefully over at the park or somewhere that'll live on for hopefully another 20, 25 years.
Thank you, John. Yeah, thank you for that. My follow-up question, I know we're close. We'll be closer to time now, group, than I thought. My follow-up question to you is, many of my colleagues have heard me use a game analogy when talking about the geopolitics of the Arctic, but I want to apply it to what you just showed us. And that is that if you think about Russia and their perspectives on the North and their view of the world in the Arctic, they're playing the game Survivor, right? This is a declining superpower, knowing full well what's happening in Ukraine. Declining demographic, resource dependent, you can keep going. But they played the game, it's not done pejoratively, but they play the game Survivor in the global perspective. China plays the game Go, long-term, geostrategic. It's the Arctic is part of their bigger play globally, and we all know that. Not pejoratively, I have said the United States to our military, for this case, plays the game Twister, because we are everywhere, and it's not pejorative. We're in the Black Sea, we're in the South China Sea, we're everywhere because we have to be, we're the superpower. And I don't have a problem with that. I kind of like the fact that the United States can inform and influence this globe. So it's a good thing. But we ask our military, and by default, our researchers within the military, to now cover a new dot on the Twister board. And there's limited, if I'm in the Indo-Pacific, I see the connection to the Arctic, but I also see the connection to my budget. And I have my own issues that I need to cover in my particular domains. So my question to you, my friend, in the Twister analogy is, I know the leadership of the Navy is supportive of putting assets and resources in the Arctic for the work that DoD needs to have, ONR needs to do, but also for our communities and for understanding the North, the future North. The next panel will show us the future of the North. But how supportive has ONR been, the Navy been, in realizing that the signal demand for a lot of reasons has gone straight up in the last 5-10 years?
Yeah, so I think, and Craig made a great point too, of thinking out years, right? And that's what the Austin Naval research is really meant to do. We're supposed to be looking out at 20 years plus. I was talking yesterday about, some work that, 20 years ago, we were looking at tidal flats in Southeast Asia. Why were we doing that? So I think that the idea is that we're looking at the Arctic now. Doesn't mean that it's that, 5-year, 10-year, it's the 20+ year out threat that we might be looking at. But I also am a realist and I work in the time, and I've been told many a times, okay, John, so we're not going to build that new DDG, and you want us to go put this money towards the Arctic. And I say, well, and I put my tail between my legs and I walk out of the room. So yeah, it's luckily that the ONR early research money is sort of fenced in that longer term, but getting that big, large program is always going to be at a cost of somewhere else that's pressing this, current events driven. But I think ONR will always have that forward-leaning focus of looking out to the, and I think this program is pretty solid with its current leadership.